Shalom. First, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakha HaKadosh. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone, from whom I learned this truth. Shalom to the 144,000 elect. And I am Mayak Allah. And this is going to be part 2 of the lesson that I started on what is the mark put on Cain in Genesis chapter 4 and 15. And when we last left off at Genesis 3 and 1, and we went also into speaking about Cain, speaking about Abel, on how he was made from the ground, and we had already established that Eve, being his wife, was a close relative or a close member of his family. So she didn't actually come from his rib, but it was described that way to indicate and show that she was a close family member. She's a relative. And so we know, being that Adam came from the ground, we talked about the color of the dust, or the color of the ground, speaking about how ruddy it is and how it's different variations of brown, all the way from a lighter brown to a dark brown. So we established that with that skin being, with the Adam's skin being a dark complexion, it would have had a certain high level of melanin. And I want to look up the definition of melanin. And I'm just looking according to Google. And this says melanin is melanin is a natural pigment that gives skin, hair, and eyes their color. It is produced by specialized cells called melanocytes, which are located in the epidermis, or the outer layer of the skin. It says there are 2 main types of melanin. Eumelanin, a brown-black pigment that provides dark skin tones. Pheomelanin, a yellow-red pigment that contributes to lighter skin tones and red hair. And it says the function of melanin. It says melanin plays a crucial role in protecting the skin from ultraviolet radiation from the sun. Eumelanin is particularly effective at absorbing UV rays, which can damage skin cells and lead to sunburn, skin cancer, and premature aging. So I want to read that again. It says eumelanin. So I pray that I'm saying that correctly. Eumelanin is melanin is particularly effective at absorbing UV rays, which can damage skin cells and lead to sunburn, skin cancer, and premature aging. So we know that anyone living in this environment would have to have a certain amount of melanin in their skin in order to protect them from this damaging radiation that comes, or UV rays that come from the sun. It says the amount of distribution of melanin in the skin varies widely among individuals, resulting in different skin tones. People with darker skin have more eumelanin, while people with lighter skin have more pheomelanin. All right, and I'm going to leave that off there. I'm not going to go too much more into that, but I am going to go over to Genesis chapter 4 and verse 1. It says, and Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord Yahweh. So let's go in to see what it means when it says, and Adam knew Eve his wife. and it is H3045. And I'll give you a pronunciation of it.
Strong's H3045. Yadah. Yadah.
All right, and I want to go under biblical usage. It says, under 1, it says to know. And I'm going to drop down to 3, it says to know. Then in parentheses, it says a person carnally. And when it says to say to know a person carnally, it means that they knew each other through having sex. They had sex. All right. So when the Bible speaks about a man knowing a woman, that's what it's speaking about. It's speaking about them having sex, speaking about them being intimate. All right. It says, and Adam knew Eve, his wife, and she conceived. So once they had sex, she conceived and bare Cain and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord Yahweh. So because I like looking up names, I want to know what Cain's name means. And Cain is H7014. And I'll give you a pronunciation of it.
Strong's H7014. Cain. Cain.
All right. And under the biblical usage, under 1, it says Cain, possession. And then it says 2, it says Kenite. And Kenite means smiths, like a blacksmiths, or smiths that make weapons, forged weapons by the use of fire and making certain types of spears or arrows or whatever they forge, whatever the smiths create. All right, and I'm going to go into the root of the word. And I'll give you a pronunciation again.
Strong's H7013. Cain. Cain.
All right, it's the same pronunciation under the root of the word. And biblical usage says spear. All right? So a smith could make a spear. All right? Or dagger. It says under the Strong's definition, it says in the original sense of fixity, it says a lance as striking past, or a spear. All right? So you can see Cain's name means a spear or dagger. So I'm going to go on to verse 2, Genesis 4:2. It says, and she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of the sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. All right, and let's go in and see what Abel's name means. And it is H1893. And I'll give you a pronunciation of the word.
Strong's H1893. Hevel. Hevel.
All right, and under the biblical usage says Abel, breath. And it says under the Strong's definition, Abel, the son of Adam. But let's take a look at the root of the word also, since we're here. And it says, under the biblical usage, it says vapor or breath. It says under the Strong's definition, something transitory and unsatisfactory, often used as an adverb. All right. So we see it means transitory. We also see that the biblical usage says vapor or breath. All right. And with it saying breath, I wanna go over just to Genesis chapter 2 and verse 7. And it says, "And the Lord Yahweh power formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life." All right. And man became a living soul. All right. So it says Abel means breath. So I want to see what breath means. It says, "And breathed into his nostrils the breath of life." And it is H 5397. And I'll give you a pronunciation of it.
Strong's H 5397. Neshama. Neshama.
All right. And let's see, under the biblical usage, it says breath. It says spirit. Breath of the Most High, the breath of man, every breathing thing. It says the spirit of man. So the Most High Yahweh breathed into Abel the breath of life, the spirit. He breathed into the spirit. And I'll read it again. It says, "And the Lord Yahweh, the power formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life." And that breath of life being the truth. All right. And the man became a living soul. All right. So we're going to go back over to Genesis chapter 4. So that's what Abel means. And reading Genesis 4 and 2 again, and she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of the sheep. So Abel was like a shepherd because he was a keeper over sheep. But Cain was a tiller of the ground. All right. So Cain, being a tiller of the ground, he would be outdoors. He would be outdoors a lot, bringing forth and planting and bringing forth vegetation and bringing forth fruit. He was a planter. He was like a farmer. So he would have been outdoors in the sun a lot. All right. So he would have had to have a certain amount of melanin in his skin in order for him to not develop any kind of skin irritations, in order for him to be able to be in the sun for so long periods of time without having some kind of pigmentation problems or some kind of skin disease or some kind of skin cancer. All right. Because he was a tiller of the ground. He was a farmer. That's what he did. He was outdoors in the sun for long periods of time. And in that period of time, the sun would have had quite a penetrating ray. It would have had quite a beam coming from it, because as we see things are today, the world is a lot different than it would have been in those times. Air was pure. There was more oxygen in the air, so I'm sure temperatures were probably a little bit different than they are right now. But I wanted to kind of look at get an idea of like what the average temperatures were. So let's see if I can go to Google and get an idea. in that area that they lived in, that area that they were in the so-called Middle East, it's been referred to as the Levant. So let's look up what the meaning of the Levant is. For those of you who don't know. And I'm just reading this from Google. Let's see if I can't get it on. See if I can't get it on this phone here. All right. All right, it says, what is the Levant in the Bible? It says, the term Levant itself is not in the Bible, as it was coined in the 18th century to describe the eastern Mediterranean region. However, the region the term refers to is central to the Bible, encompassing biblical lands like Canaan, the land of Israel, and the Holy Land. This area includes modern-day Israel, Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, and was home to the biblical Israelites and the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. And I'll give you a picture of it just so you can see where it's really talking about. All right. And I wanted to get an idea of what the average temperatures were like, or what they are like today. And it says an average temperature in the Levant varies significantly by location and season, with coastal areas having milder temperatures compared to inland and higher altitude regions. Summers are hot and dry, with daytime temperatures often exceeding 90 degrees. That's exceeding 90 degrees. It says in July, while in winters are mild and humid along the coast, with average daily highs around 61 degrees in January, though they can be cooler inland and in higher elevations. So, all right, so we can see that in the summertime, in the summer months, it's exceeds 90 degrees. So you can imagine at that time it was probably closer to 100 degrees on average. So with the sun being as strong as it was and beaming as it would have been harsh on a pale skin. And a pale skin wouldn't be able to be out and till the ground and be out doing farming, because just as we saw with a lack of melanin in the skin, you're susceptible to skin cancers and skin irritations. All right, so I'm gonna go back to Genesis chapter 4, and I'm just gonna drop down to 8 because I'm not gonna read all of this. And it says, and Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. All right, so Cain, being as he was, because of his offering not being accepted to the Lord, and Abel's offer being accepted by the Lord because it was a righteous offering, Cain, in a fit of rage, slew his brother. Verse 9, it says, and the Lord Yahweh said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. So he's lying. All right, that's a characteristic of the Edomites. We looked at that in previous lessons. It says, am I my brother's keeper? So he's lying to the Lord. He's lying to the Most High, Yahweh. And he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. So the blood that he's from him slaying his brother Abel was crying out from that ground, that very ground in which Cain was a tiller of. All right, it's cried out to Yahweh and pleading to him to avenge or to punish Cain for what he had done to Abel. Verse 11 says, and now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. So that very ground was crying out to the Lord Yahweh. And Cain said unto the Lord Yahweh, my punishment is greater than I can bear. It says, behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth. And it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. So Cain was feeling like the punishment that he was about to receive, or the curse that he was going to receive from the Lord Yahweh, was going to be too much for him to bear, too much for him to handle. In verse 15 it says, and the Lord Yahweh said unto him, therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. Now you may be looking at this as he's being protected by the Lord. Well, the Lord Yahweh is saving him. He wants to slay that spirit himself. He wants to smite that spirit himself. So he doesn't want anyone on the earth, walking the earth, to take vengeance on this man, because this man and this spirit has to be eradicated from the earth. And it's going to take the Lord Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, to do this, because this man, as we already can see, he is a murderer. He's a liar. He did this to his own brother. Verse 15, I'm going to start again. It says, and the Lord Yahweh said unto him, therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord Yahweh set a mark upon Cain, lest any finding him should kill him. So he put a mark on Cain. Now this mark would have been a mark that would have been noticeable. This is a physical mark. And let's take a look and see what that word mark means. And it is H226. And I'll give you a pronunciation of it.
Strong's H226. Oath. Oath.
All right, and it's pronounced oath, just like an oath that you take when you're going to court, or being sworn into a position. It says under the biblical uses, it says a sign or a signal. All right, it's a distinguishing mark, a banner, or remembrance, or a miraculous sign. All right, omen or warning. And under the Strong's definition, it says a signal. It says literally or figuratively, as a flag. It's a beacon. All right, so this type of mark would have been apparent to anyone in the region, anyone living, anyone coming across him, coming across Cain. It would be a beacon that would set him apart from anyone else that was living at this time, or anyone else that would be in this region. So this mark obviously would have been a mark upon his skin, because everybody else living in the Levant would have had the similar qualities. Because like I said, They were made from the ground. They were had a certain amount of melanin in their skin in order to protect them from the UV rays. It showed you that the average temperature was above 90 degrees. All right. So this was a physical mark that was put upon Cain to identify him. Even from a distance, you would know, and the people would know not to destroy him, not to slay him. All right. So the Lord marked him, put a distinct mark on him. All right. I wanted to go over, and let's see if you remember when we looked at Chat GPT, it did mention leprosy was a possibility as the mark being uh, placed upon Cain, but ChatGPT showed that the scholars want to play as if they don't know, or maybe they just really don't know what this mark was. It also mentioned vitiligo, and we're gonna look up vitiligo to see what that is. But I'm gonna go over to Numbers, chapter 12. And we're going to go over to go down to verse 10. And this is Miriam, the sister of Moses. And this is when they were in the wilderness. Moses' sister and brother Aaron, Miriam and Aaron were speaking against Moses. So as a result of their disobedience unto the Lord Yahweh, the Lord was putting a distinct curse or a distinct mark on Miriam also. So this is Numbers chapter 12 and verse 10, and it says, "And the cloud departed from off the tabernacle, and behold, Miriam became leprous, or white as snow." So it's telling you right there what leprous is. It's telling you that she became leprous, white as snow. And Aaron looked upon Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. So let's look at the blue letter and see what that definition of leprosy is. And I think I'm going to Google it also. And it is H6879. It says, and I'll give you a pronunciation of it.
Strong's H6879. Sarah. Sarah.
All right. And it says, to be diseased of skin, be leprous, to be a leper. Under the Strong's definition, it says to be stricken with leprosy. Let's see if is there a root here. Let's see what I get here. All right, I'll tell you what, we're going to go over to Google. And I'm going to Google leprosy. All right, and it says biblical leprosy, also known as tzarath, is a term used in the Bible to describe a skin disease or a group of diseases that were considered impure and contagious. Characteristics, it says skin lesions that were white, scaly, or raised, spots that could spread to clothing or houses, considered a sign of impurity or punishment from the Most High. In the historical context, it says, in the historical times, leprosy was feared and stigmatized. People with leprosy were often isolated from society, and that is what was also to happen to Cain, as we'll read a little bit, one more or two more verses, and see he was isolated. It says, in biblical times, leprosy was feared and stigmatized. People with leprosy were often isolated from society and considered unclean. So even when Miriam had been given the leprosy. She had to sit outside the gate. She couldn't stay. She had to stay outside the camp. It says the Bible contains numerous stories about people with leprosy, including the healing of Naaman by the prophet Elijah. That's in 2 Kings chapter 5. And the 10 lepers healed by Yahushua, Luke 17 and 11. Okay, we're not going to go there on those. Just in the interest of time. So we can see that this leprosy is a skin disease, all right? And it says it could be legions that were white, but we can see just from the scripture itself, when we read Numbers 12 and 10, it says Miriam became leprous, white as snow. It tells you exactly right there what happened to her. So it wasn't just areas of her skin. She became white as snow. All right. And there's one more thing I wanted to Google. I wanted to Google vitiligo also, because anybody who knows anything about Michael Jackson knows that that is what he was diagnosed with, to have vitiligo. Let's see if I can. There we go. All right. It says vitiligo is a chronic skin condition that causes loss of pigment or melanin in certain areas of the body, resulting in white or light patches of skin. Let's see if we can get a look at that. So we can see that's just patches of skin, or in Michael Jackson's case, turned him white all over. All right. Says the exact cause of vitiligo is unknown, but is believed to be an autoimmune disorder where the body's immune system mistakenly attacked and destroys melanocytes or melanocytes, the cells that produces melanin. So it attacks the cells that produce melanin in your body. All right, that's enough of that there. I'm gonna go back over to Genesis, and this will be the last verse that I bring out, because I think we're getting an understanding of what happened, what that mark was that was placed upon Cain. It says, verse 16, Genesis chapter 4 and 16, it says, and Cain went out from the presence of the Lord Yahweh and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. It says, and Cain knew his wife, so he had taken a wife, and she conceived and bare Enoch, and he builded a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. So there's another clue of what type of spirit was upon Cain, because instead of being a tiller of the ground as he had been, but because of the curse that was placed upon him, the curse that was placed upon his skin, and because of his brother's blood crying out unto the Lord from the ground, he could not till the ground again, because the ground wouldn't yield to him. He couldn't bring, it wouldn't bring forth that vegetation. It wouldn't bring forth that, allow him to be that type of farmer, that type of outdoorsman. But you see that he became the builder of cities. And that's just another, like I said, that's just another clue of the type of spirit that was upon Cain. So and you have to think about who are builders of cities today, who likes to build skyscrapers, who likes to put concrete and asphalt all over the place, covering up natural things, just so that they can build cities and build habitations that they like. All right. As a matter of fact, you can see the Gaza Strip being destroyed right now, so that they can build up a city and put what they want to put there. So this spirit is of Cain would later on be the spirit that was put into Esau, Jacob's brother. All right, and he was described as coming out as red and hairy all over. All right, because his blood showed forth through his skin, and you can see that says even here that Cain took a wife. So if Cain had taken a wife, and Cain had that, his skin was stricken with a lack of melanin. He was a pale man, that he would bring forth children that would be pale. All right. But as I said, and I may not have mentioned it, but I've mentioned it before in previous lessons, that you have to take the information that you're being given and being shown, because a lot of times it's not going to come right out and say exactly how you want it to be said. In order for you to understand, you have to extrapolate and take the information and take the clues and take the facts that you've been given and be able to put those things together, and you can get a clearer understanding. All right. But I'm going to leave it there, and I pray that this lesson has been edifying to the listener. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah HaKadosh. Shalom.